Hey guys, Kevin is for the Knick, Season 2, Episode 2, You're No Rose, and I was definitely looking forward to this episode. The premiere was absolutely fantastic, and I was hoping this would be another great episode. And I thought this episode was actually better than the first episode. I really loved the first episode, but everyone was divided in last week's episode, and it was definitely more of like, here's where the season's going, and this was more of let's actually get things started, because this episode was crazy. There was so much put into just this one episode, and I love that. There's so much to get into this season, and this is going to be a crazy season, you can already tell. And I can already tell this is definitely going to be better than season 1. I can just tell it's going to be. But let's get into this episode because it was amazing, and I absolutely loved every minute of it. So right away we see that as we know, Speight last week was looking into the deaths of two stowaways of the South Street Seaport, and those two men took him. Well, most likely because of that they have now killed him, because we find out right away that Speight is dead. He is found on the banks. He's found dead on the banks of the river, and we have no idea why. And I thought that was just such a great opening. I mean, it's such like wow, this is just so abrupt, and I love that. I thought that was fantastic. So Bertie and Algernon walk to work together, and Bertie tells him that it wasn't difficult to gain entry into one of the private institutions. He merely listed symptoms of alcohol he read in a medical manual, and that hospital was obviously willing to admit him once once inside, he was horrified by what he saw. And it was done to the patients who one can hardly defy his treatment, and he wonders if this is where John might be, because of course, they still don't know where John is. John is now missing right now at this point, and he's MIA, so they don't know where he is. And he reads an article aloud from Collier's Weekly, and Algernon asks if Bunky took the drugs, and Bertie says it was actually a reporter, the female reporter Genevieve Everidge, who went undercover as an addict to write an expose on malpractice at a rehab facility. As the two men approach the Knick, they are shocked to see Gallinger and John arriving at the hospital as well. Obviously, they did not expect them to return, and now they have returned. And basically, the rest of the episode is them dealing with the aftermath of that. And basically, we then see John tells the board that he's actually ready to return to the Knick. He's returned. He wants to be chief of surgery, which obviously Algernon's not too happy about because that's the position that Algernon wanted. And they said that they have a report and that says he walked away. And John says that it wasn't safe. And Gallinger essentially saved him. That's what he basically says, that, Gallinger was the one that saved him from this. And he says he's back because he's well again. And I'm not really sure about that, guys. I mean, I don't know if I'm buying it. I mean, John keeps saying he's well again, but throughout this episode, I still feel John's kind of unstable, and he says he hasn't taken any cocaine in some time, and the heroin drug that they treat him with has completely gone through his system, and Lucy is then informed by another doctor of John's return. Obviously, she really wants to see him again because you could tell how much she missed him in last week's episode, and how much she just wanted to, stay with him and be with him. And John says he needs to be busy again at work, and he's confident in his ability to do so, though the board disagrees. And Barrow says he has to be monitored and will need approval for any degenerate medications he takes out of dispensary, and they will assign someone to look at his skin to be sure there are no signs of injection of any kind. And the board says that this is John's fault, and Henry says they're doing this because they want him to succeed. They're better off when he had a scalpel in his hand, and John says he actually doesn't plan on doing much surgery because he wants to find a cure on the cause and nature of addiction. If you remember, last week he wanted to find the cure, and this is how he's going to do. He's going to return to the Knick, which I didn't think of that possibility, but yeah, it does make sense, because who would have a cure? A hospital would. What hospital would he go to? The Knick. It would make perfect sense that way. And basically, Henry says what they're banking on is his reputation as a surgeon. His towering stature can help them finance the new Knick, and he says donors want to see him performing magic in the surgical theater, not him hovering over a microscope. And basically, he's trying to say that, I'm in no condition to perform a surgery right now. I just can't do it. And the board feels it's all a waste of time, and feel addiction is ridiculous and doesn't need studying, which John feels should be treated like any other disease. And the board tries to come to a decision, and John says if he can find a cure, that the Knick will become the leading hospital in treating the epidemic, and they can charge handsomely for that treatment. Then they ask how he will go finding the cure, and he basically tells them, I have no idea how he's going to do that. He says, I have no idea, and what's going to happen. So a driver then hears a complaint about something wrong with the ambulance, and tells them that they will get it fixed up. And he tells Cleary about the problem. Basically, the ambulance it's not working well, and he says the wheel came off and knocked a lady out cold. Cleary says he doesn't give a fuck about them and to get it fixed before he meets his maker. And one of his workers, Pete, keeps on annoying him. He keeps telling him shut the fuck up, which I thought was really funny. They will have the ambulance fixed and on their way. And John then sits back at his desk and then at the Knick and finds a drawer with papers. And then Lucy comes to him. And this scene between them was incredible. I really loved it. She shuts the blinds and closed the door. I was thinking she was gonna like try to have sex with him or something by doing that, but of course, nobody knows how, I realized that not many people know that John and Lucy were together. Not many people even knew about their whole thing going on. And she tells him how worried she was about him and how she got so sick about it and prayed every night. Then he went missing and she thought she'd never see him again. And he says he needed to get better. And she asks if he says he is. And she tries to kiss him and he pulls away and she asks him what's wrong. I was surprised when he pulled away, but she tells him she loves him and he loves her. She knows he does because he said to her, he says that he said and did a great many of things he shouldn't have. He basically didn't mean what he said to her. And I never really thought that John truly did love Lucy. I always thought he would just kind of pulled her in and just, he was addicted and she wanted to be a part of it, so he pulled her in that way. And he says that she is young and tells him that they just, they can't be together, and tells him that, she tells him that they need time together, and she's crying, obviously. And I like what he tells her. He lets her off pretty easily. He tells her that she's young, she's beautiful, and there's so much possibility in here. He says if they end things now, people will be any the wiser and she can start anew. No one will suspect anything going on and she can just start over, but she doesn't want to, and she doesn't want to continue. He tells her it's the only way and tells her to go. She says she can't. She was assigned, and we realize that she was the one assigned by Barrow to check him for needle marks. And because, Barrow thought a colleague would be too humiliating, and since she knows all of his hiding places, she would probably be the best one to check him. So she's gonna do that, and that's gonna be very awkward for John and Lucy, but I love that because it's gonna be very interesting to see how they can work things out here. Um, and I wouldn't be surprised if she's able to pull him back in. I wouldn't be surprised that happens. So Cornelia steps outside and is greeted by Henry in the automobile, and he says it's how they're going to run the subways when they're built. And he says he wished he knew she was coming. He would have given her a ride. And she talks to him about her in-laws, and she says she decided she's going to organize the fundraising ball for the Knick. And I like seeing Cornelia go right back into this position. But Algernon, John, Gallinger, and Mays are at the hospital operating a new patient, and this scene is very important. I didn't think it was going to be as important as it was, but it really is an important scene. Algernon updates John on some changes made while he was away, and John tells them about the patient who suffered from severe ear infection. I like this scene because you can just tell how much Algernon's taken over and how John's not really happy about that. He doesn't really like the change that has been made, because he hasn't really had any say in these changes. He hasn't, said, oh, I agree, I don't agree. He hasn't been able to say any of that because he's been away, and now that he's back, it's kind of just, he feels very odd. And John tells about the patient who suffered from a severe ear infection from fluid that could cause it to burst, and since he's so familiar with the procedure, he should perform it. And Algernon says that Gallinger would be the better choice. And obviously John's like, Gallinger? Why would you pick Gallinger? Because obviously Algernon hates Gallinger and doesn't like him whatsoever, and, he thinks that he would have been a better choice. And he says it's time you start relinquishing patients, and Gallinger has been out for a while. This would be a good procedure to resharpen his skills, and he assures him his skills haven't doubled, but it'll take him. And I can understand where Algernon is coming from, but of course we know that Algernon's only doing this so he doesn't have to perform the surgery because of his eye. And John asks Algernon if he's okay, and he says he's just surprised to see him back and wasn't expecting it. And John tells Algernon that he doesn't like the new changes Algernon's made. He needs to fix it, and he's just not happy about it. He can tell that there are things going on that he just is not happy about. So Cleary talks to Barrow about the ambulance, and he says just a few mechanical difficulties, and that's temporary. And Barrow is as pissed as you can imagine. He says that if there are any more problems, he will terminate the arrangement. Cleary asks if he can have his next payment early, and Barrow says he will happily wait. And Barrow then looks to see all of his prostitutes from Ping Wu coming to the Knick. Obviously, this is something that he never planned on happening, and he's really upset about. He asks for Lucy's assistance and explains to her what it's for, and Barrow then introduces them all, and Ping Wu is there too, and it's just a very awkward thing. You can imagine how weird this is for everyone, and Lucy recognizes him from her association with John, and Ping Wu says they have their own relationship, and Barrow explains to Lucy why the women are there. Mays comes by, and Barrow explains to him the situation, and he offers to lend a hand to Lucy, and he says they're just organizing it now, and Mays goes to help one of them, and I think, like, Mays, he's kind of taking over when Lucy doesn't really need him to, and he tells Barrow he has everything under control, and the women need their privacy, and he leaves him and Lucy, and they're clashing over how to treat the women. She clearly doesn't trust him whatsoever because he's a new doctor, he's inexperienced, he doesn't really know what he's doing, and he thinks he does. And that's something that Lucy obviously is not okay with, and really doesn't seem like anyone's okay with. Nobody seems to like Maze, and you can clearly understand why. I mean, he seems like he knows what he's doing when you're really not sure. I mean, he's a new doctor. So Birdie asks what they do now that John is back, and they can't be sure. He is confident about everything they've heard, and basically John basically says that he will tear everything down. That they've built the madness, the efficiency, and the circus tent will all come roaring back in Gallinger with him. And he basically is warning Algernon they just can't trust him. And Cornelia then returns to the Knick in a philanthropic capacity, joining the society ladies who are planning a fundraising ball for the new hospital construction. And this was really interesting, but then things get really great when she runs into Birdie in the hall, and basically he tells her about Speight's demise, and obviously this is when things really get great for Cornelia. After this, she gets a really great plot. Birdie then goes to see John, who tells him he's happy to see him back, and Birdie says he's there to tender his resignation from the Knick. And this scene between John and Birdie is both heartbreaking, but it's also pretty inevitable. I mean, you knew this was coming. You knew that Birdie and John were not going to be the same when he came back, and you knew that Birdie was not going to forgive John. And John says he knows they had a rough patch near the end, but he doesn't need to make this decision now. And he says this is the least abrupt, and Birdie says that this is the least abrupt way he could do it. And he says he was impressed paired with drugs that made him do things he wouldn't have done if he wasn't on them. And Birdie thinks that they actually made him more like his true self. And he says he sounds like his father talking. And he then talks about Lucy and how he truly loved her. And John says she's free of him. And he says the circle of people that know about their past is minuscule. And if he can see beyond it, Birdie says he's no less insane than before. He's even more insane. And John says that Virginia means nothing. And regardless of what she's done with him, she's no less pure than before. And before she got there, and he realizes that Birdie didn't know that he had sex with her. And this is obviously a huge thing for Birdie, and Birdie's heartbroken, and he leaves, and I felt really bad for Birdie, because he knew that they were together, but he didn't know how close they really were, that they had sex, and he didn't know about any of that. And obviously, John, you can tell, is really upset, but it's not something that he can change. I mean, he did it, and what's done is done. Even though John wants people to forgive him, some of the stuff he's done is just kind of too late, and what's done is done, and John now needs to deal with the aftermath, which it doesn't really seem like he wants to. He wants to start anew, like what he said to Lucy. I want to start anew. He wants to start anew, but he's had so much. He's damaged so many relationships and ruined so many things that I don't know if that's possible. So Cleary then introduces Harriet to a lawyer, Mr. Whitting, who Cleary says is the best lawyer in the whole city that cares about her, and he greets her as a sister, and she tells him that she's not a sister no more. He says she will be if it all goes well. She says she will get 15 years instead of 20, and Cleary asks why she's being so negative, and she tells Whitting to tell Cleary what he doesn't know, and he basically tells him that the law states that any person who willfully performs a miscarriage shall be punished in a state prison for a term not less than 4 years or more than 20 years. So basically, she is going to be in prison no matter what. And Cleary asks who would do that to a nun, and Harriet says they would do it to a nun who did what she did. And Cleary tells Whitting that he's bringing her down, says he thought he said she had a chance, and that's why he brought him out there. And he says she does have a chance. The orphanage and poor will help her, though he hasn't mentioned the children because he thinks the involvement will remind of the people she once aborted. And Cleary says to tell her about the loopholes and seems to be ignoring all the bad things that could happen to Harry. He doesn't want her to think about all these terrible things and the bad reputation, she has. People are talking about her, obviously. People will obviously be talking about what's going on with her, because this is just very controversial back then. And Whitting finally brings up the loopholes, and he says he's looking for any possible loopholes in the way the laws are written. And Cleary says that it's because of him, and Whitting says it's not unusual. He was the one that got him to say this, and Whitting says it's not unusual for cops, such as the one that got her to set traps, such as the one that ensnared her. And he tells her he has scheduled a meeting to ask the judge if the case should go to rest before it even actually goes to trial. And Cleary says that they will have her out of there in no time, and he's just trying to keep her in high spirits. You can tell, though, that Harriet is she's looking at things a lot more realistically than Cleary is. I'm not saying that Cleary isn't looking at things realistically. I think Cleary just wants her to look at things in a better way than it truly is. And basically, He gets some information out of her. Cleary finds out her real name is Rose, and she took Harriet after her vows, and he says that Harriet suits her better, which, yeah, I could not see Harriet as Rose. I just couldn't. Cleary then asks Whitting if he thinks he'll have everything ready by the first hearing, and he says he thinks so, but it's still the matter of his fees and expenses, and we realize that he needs money from Cleary, who promises him he will get him his money by the end of the week. They will get him in the ambulance, and still it's not starting for whatever reason. It's broken, and he tells him he'll get him a carriage, and we realize that's why he was so mad at, that's why he wanted the money so much from Barrow, because he can't afford this lawyer, and he needs to get that money because he wants Harriet to get out of this trial. He doesn't want bad things to happen to her, and he doesn't want her in jail. And I really felt bad for Cleary, I have to say. You can tell why he's being so tough on his workers. He clearly is facing a lot, and he needs to take out his anger on someone, so he's taking it out on his workers. And Cornelia's approached by Detective Shatterley, who asks her what she wants to know about Speight's death, and he tells her that Speight got drunk and fell into the river on the ferry home to Brooklyn, and she asks if anyone saw him fall, and she doesn't believe this at all, and he says no one sounded for overboard. A drunk slip is quieter than she thinks, and when it happens, they can't even hear the splash of a fall, and they get one like this every week or two. And this, he seems to be very, dismissive. He seems to just be like, this is just this, it's nothing else, don't worry about it. So she contacts Algernon because clearly this guy is being very shady, and he doesn't even call her by her first name at first. It's obviously very awkward between her and Algernon. He thought they were going to start something, but they haven't started something, and obviously things are just very weird between them. And she asks if anyone saw him fall in, and he says no one sounded for overboard. Oh, I just read that. Basically, she asks him point blank if it's possible to detect alcohol in a person, specifically a dead one, and he asks why. She asks and tells him about Speight and how mysterious it is, because, yeah, it's true. How would they be able to tell that he had alcohol on him if he was dead? It doesn't seem plausible for something like that to happen. I don't think that's possible anyway. I don't think you can just detect alcohol from someone, from their death. It just doesn't seem like something that's possible, and basically, Algernon asks if it's really her business, and she tells him that Speight never drank, never has, not a drop, and was a firm believer in temperance, so there was no way he could have drank here. And, Algernon's saying that a lot of men who have been known to lose their morals bend their elbow at a bar and would excuse his inability to hold his liquor. And Cornelia said it's very strange and no one's giving a second look to it, which is true. I mean, at least try to think about it. If he never drank, why would he have gotten drunk? It just doesn't really make sense. And he says he's guessing she hasn't spoken to Philip about this, which she said she hasn't, and she says she knows she shouldn't get involved. He says he could probably devise a test, but she would have to get to his body before he could decompose, which could happen a lot quicker. But of course, Speight has already been buried, which Algernon says it's beyond his skills. He can't get him out of the grave. It's just not something he can do. So Cleary yells at one of his fighters who is not doing as well as he was 3 weeks ago, and Cleary doesn't know why. And he realizes that the match was actually fixed, and Cleary doesn't believe it at first, but the winner says he has nothing to do with it, and he simply allowed it to be, and Cleary asks who fixed it, and he says it was the manager who wanted to unload him on a sap. He said it was him, and the fighter says Cleary can have the dollar he made tonight, and again, Cleary cannot afford this lawyer. I mean, just any way, he can't afford it, and I felt so bad for Cleary. He really wants Harriet to get this surgery, and it's not going to work out because he can't afford the lawyer, unfortunately. So John sits at his desk, and we realize the image of the girl. I forgot about what happened in the finale. The girl he's seeing is not just some girl. It's actually that girl that he failed to save in his last surgery before he left in his head, which would make sense. I mean, obviously, he couldn't save her, and that's probably why he doesn't want to perform any surgeries. And he then goes to the Haymarket, which is a dance hall, also a bit of a bar, and he strikes up a conversation with this girl named Kate. Now, Kate is a very interesting character, and I think could end up being a very interesting character on the show. He previously struck up a flirtation with her. Basically, she talks about the song that's playing, and she asks if he wants to dance with her, and he flat out says no. He just says, no, I do not want to dance with you. And instead, he has sex with her. And when he finishes, he tells her he's not married, and he clearly doesn't want some kind of emotional attachment, or he says, look, I don't want you to come by my apartment. I don't want this, and I think he just doesn't want what happened with Lucy to happen with anyone else. He doesn't want anyone to hate him, and he doesn't feel like he deserves romance right now, which I think is really interesting. So Philip and Cornelia then talk about their experience in California and how no one knew about rich people and they don't seem to care about what's going on in New York. Now, if you guys know, I mean, this was at a time when there was no middle class. It was simply just you were rich or you were poor. There was nothing in the middle. And they all agree they don't ever want to move there. And Philip's father says that their father has been kidnapped, all the best layer has kidnapped all the best labor for the new hospital. They'll just have to dig deeper. And Henry says they shouldn't. Charity's all well and good, and he does believe in it. And I really love the scene between Henry and Cornelia's father. I think it was just really interesting. Henry and Robert. Very interesting stuff here. He says they need other donors to lessen their share, and he says he's just doing what the Californians are doing, looking ahead, and they could use that money to diversify. And he talks about the subway and how there's another position available. And everyone's thinking this is a horrible idea, but Henry looks at it as the inevitable future. But everyone seems to be against him. Everyone thinks it's a terrible idea, but I honestly do agree with Henry that it's probably the best thing to do. So Algernon's with his father, and I like this scene with Algernon's father because his father's telling him about, how, his workplace, and Algernon talks about it. They expect him to thank them on a daily basis for the gifts they give him. He talks about how he doesn't want special treatment and how he's just another doctor and he just wants to be treated that way. He doesn't want to be treated like this special person because he's not. He's just another doctor, and that's all how he wants to be treated. And I really like seeing that from Algernon. It seemed like last week he really did want to be the chief, but again, that's just another position. He doesn't want to be treated like some superhero just to get sympathy. Obviously, people are starting to become more accepting of him being black, but now they're just making it seem like, they're too accepting, and he doesn't want that either. He just wants a middle. He wants to be normal. He doesn't want to be treated in a different way. He just wants to be normal, which I like seeing. So Lucy's visited by her father, E.D. Elkins, who is a preacher, and he asks if she's all right. She stopped writing. They got concerned, and she assures him that she's fine. And I really feel E.D. is going to be the person to steer Lucy back in the right direction, because let's face it, Lucy's kind of in a bad direction right now. Obviously, she's obsessed with John. She's been obsessed with John, and I feel he's going to be the person to maybe get her out of that. And she says he didn't have to leave to everyone back home for her. He says he may not have wanted her there, but if she is, he wanted to make sure she's all right because everyone's soulmates protect them. And he says his services may also be needed for people who need God. And she gives him toward the Knick and basically tells him the extraordinary stuff they can do in there and says that it's things that might even impress him. And I definitely like that scene. You can tell how much he cares about her. And I really like his character, I have to say. So Barrow comes by to check John's vials, and he asks what all the medication is for, and he tells him that they should get rid of Maze. And Barrow says he barely even knows him, and John says he knows enough to know he'd rather have Barrow operate him with a spoon. And Barrow says, and I like what Barrow says, that everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves, and he should agree on that, because, he's now come back, and they obviously don't trust him, but he wants to prove himself, and if he wants that, he's being a bit of a hypocrite in saying that, Maze shouldn't be there when he is there because he wants to prove himself that he's better than they think he is, which I like seeing. So John sees Lucy. She introduces him to ED, and he talks about the care that Lucy gives to all patients and what she's seen, and says she truly is the best of them all. And again, John really does care about her, but he just can't be with her right now. So John then discovers a fever cabinet that has been installed at the Knick in his absence, and he finds Algernon to inquire further into the purchase, catching the surgeon as he puts some drops into his eye. And this scene between Algernon and John was really well done. He asks if something is wrong with his eye, and Algernon claims it's just a scratched cornea. He also says it's just because of a patient that requires it, and John just doesn't believe him because it's just too much money and too much care for just one surgery. I mean, that wouldn't really make a lot of sense. Why would you go out of your way to just buy, a fever cabinet for one little surgery? It wouldn't make any sense. And Algernon says that basically, Algernon says that he wants to, and John can tell that there's something else going on. And the fact that, how he passed on giving the surgery and gave it to Gallinger. He just doesn't understand that, and he knows there's something going on there. And he finally confesses, and, luckily Algernon finally confessed. I was thinking this was something that he was going to hide, but luckily he does confess to him what's going on. He asks him to do an experimental surgery to drain the eye of excessive fluid. And he says he's the only one he can trust, and John agrees to do the digging further, and he's going to help him get surgery on his eye. But of course, John's biggest fear, is to perform surgery, so this really is not going to go well. So Cornelia meets with a Tammany Hall official and discovers that his entire office has been bribed to keep Speight's case closed. So, again, he's not really revealing anything to her, and she can tell that there's something shady going on here. Especially with Cleary. This is very interesting. She goes to see Cleary and tells him that she's married. Now, he hasn't seen her since she's been married, and asks him to help her, and she says that Harriet told her he used to dig graves at Pottersfield, and he says he did, and she asks if he still does, and he digs Speight's grave, and she asks if he's sure the guard won't say anything. He says he gave him too much whiskey to talk, and she asks how Harriet is doing, and he asks if she's ever been inside outside of a jailhouse and tells her how bad it is and the whisperings he's heard, telling her she's never going to get out, and he's known a few tough lads who turn to jelly after a while in a place like that. But Harriet is tougher than all of them, but not for much longer. She's starting to go, and he's really worried about it. Again, he's really trying to keep her in a positive mood, but it seems like she very slowly is starting to just realize that she's probably not going to get out. And she asks what she can do, and he says he's got a good lawyer, upper class like her. The problem is he can't afford her, but she can, and that would make sense. That's how he can afford the lawyer. And she says she'll do everything she can. And he opens the grave, and basically Speight's body is missing. It's not there. Where it is, we don't know, but it's not there. So Edie then gives a service at a church, talks about his experience at the Knick and how he's never met people like them, and maybe they never met anyone like him or Lucy, but they all share the language of God. They then start a hymn, and John prepares for Algernon's surgery, but again, wherever he looks, when he looks at that medical operating table, all he sees is the girl he couldn't save, and he starts the surgery. However, Algernon can tell how unstable John is and begs him to stop the surgery. He gets a little cut around this part of his, like, right here on his cheek, and John cuts right below his eye. Algernon gets up, forces him to stop, and Algernon obviously is not going to perform the surgery because John's in no condition to perform a surgery. I mean, it's just, you knew it wasn't going to go well, and I thought John was going to, like, really hurt his eye, but luckily he didn't. And back at the Haymarket, John then sees Kate. She flirts with him and asks if they're not dancing again tonight, and he gets her a drink and then notices needle marks of heroin in her arm. And she says the other has cocaine. She injects both at the same time. She says the cocaine takes the top of the heroin takes the bottom of the cocaine, and they dance beautifully together. And John says until they wear off, she says unless you get the right amounts wrong, and if they don't, they'll kill you, but they go well together if you do them right. So I don't know if John's sort of thinking that maybe this should be something that he should be doing, but I thought that was very interesting, and that basically is how this episode ends. So overall, guys, I thought this was even better than last week. I thought this episode was even better. There's so much to talk about. I mean, first of all, John and this girl, obviously, he is obsessed with this little girl. He obviously wanted to save her, and he's going to have to get over it, but it doesn't seem like John is getting over it anytime soon. It seems like he's just obsessed with the fact that he couldn't save her, and I feel like John thinks that that's what's going to happen now, is that he's not going to be able to save anyone, and he's just not really focused right now. And Algernon does need someone to help him with the surgery. John's just not the person to do it, honestly. Gallinger, honestly, I think is going to be the person to do it because, obviously, Gallinger probably would not help out Andre, though. He obviously, Andre, I don't know who Andre is. I don't know, I just said Andre. He's not the person to help out Algernon, but you know, I think John will be when he's better. Now, what's going to happen between him and Kate? I really am worried that Kate is going to end up like Lucy. I hope that doesn't happen. Speaking of Lucy, I really feel that ED is going to steer in the right direction and maybe put her back on the path that she needs to be, because obviously Lucy's, like I said, is kind of lost right now, and I feel like ED really is going to help her with that. Let's talk about Cleary. I really do feel bad for him. Hopefully Cornelia can help him get the money, but who has taken Speight's body? Why is it missing? Is there something more going on there? There clearly is more going on that they don't know about, and I like that because, you know, we know that he was probably killed by those men, but what is going on? Why'd they take him? What's this whole thing about? I mean, there's something more going on. We just don't know what it is yet, and I like what's going on with Cleary, like I said, though. He doesn't have the money. There's definitely something going on there, and I feel hopefully, you know, Cornelia can give him that money. I really like what's going on with Henry, I have to say, because, you know, Henry's in this position where he really wants to, you know, go ahead with this subway, but nobody really wants to, and he's kind of just stuck, because obviously if no one wants to, it's not going to happen. So hopefully he can find a way to do it, but it seems at this point it's just not as that possible. Hopefully it'll work out, but we'll have to see what happens with that, because that's going to be very interesting. Birdie and John, their whole friendship, that's over. Their relationship is strained. I don't think anything's gonna fix it, really. Lucy being John's, the doctor to find all of the needles, that's gonna be very interesting to see what happens between Lucy and John, because obviously he let her go, and she obviously still likes him. You can tell that she still wants to be with John, and it's gonna be interesting to see what happens between them. That definitely is gonna be something I'm looking forward to. Mays as a doctor. Do you trust Mays? I really feel that Mays, I think he's a good doctor, but he's just very inexperienced and should not really be there right now. But Barrow is convinced that he should, and the only scene I didn't talk about this episode had to do with Barrow and Wood. So I don't know if that scene was really that important. I really don't think it was. If you guys thought it was important, okay, but I didn't talk about it. But overall, guys, amazing episode. Loving this season. I know this is going to be an amazing season. And let me know what you guys saw this episode. I will see you guys in my next video, which will finally be for the very long movie trailer roundup. I know I have taken so long to do it, but I will do it in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.